Distinguishing among three forms of assessment. This learning material introduces the three forms of assessment: assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. Prepositions for, as, and of means a lot. They make a big difference in assessment. Assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning have different purposes. With this learning material, you must be able to distinguish among the three forms of assessment. Three forms of assessment: assessment for learning, assessment as learning, assessment of learning will now be explained. First, assessment for learning. The preposition for in assessment for learning implies that assessment is done to improve and ensure learning. This is referred to as formative assessment. To better remember, first three letters of the word formative. 4. Formative assessment: assessment that is given while the teacher is in the process of student formation or learning. It ensures that learning is going on while teacher is in the process of teaching. The teachers do not lose anything if, as they teach, they check for understanding now and then. This is to ensure that before they proceed further or come near at the end of the chapter, unit, or course or grading period, the students understood the lesson. Teachers provide feedback to students about their learning and how to improve. It will be a waste of time if teachers just proceed with their teaching, presuming that students understood the lesson, only to discover at the end of the unit or grading period that students, after all, did not understand the lesson. So much time has already been wasted. Lack of understanding of the lesson must have been compounded because the ABCs of the lesson were not mastered, and the teacher already proceeded to XYZ. Too late to discover that at the end of a unit or a grading period, the students did not learn what was expected of them. Formative assessment also includes the pre-test and the post-test that a teacher gives to ensure learning. Why the pre-test? It is to find out where the students are or determine their entry knowledge or skills so teacher knows how to adjust instruction. Why the post-test? It is to find out if the intended learning outcome has been attained after the teaching learning process. If not all students have attained it, then teacher has to apply an intervention or a remediation. Why do this have to take place? To ensure learning, that's the term assessment for learning. In assessment for learning, teachers use assessment results to inform or adjust their learning. Next, assessment as learning. Assessment as learning is associated with self-assessment. As the term implies, assessment by itself is already a form of learning for the students. As students assess their own work, for example a paragraph, and are with their peers with the use of scoring rubrics, they learn on their own what a good paragraph is. At the same time as they are engaged in self-assessment, they learn about themselves as learners, example, paragraph writers, and become aware of how they learn. This involves students in the learning process where they monitor their own progress, ask questions, and practice skills. In assessment as learning, students set their targets, actively monitor and evaluate their own learning in relation to their set target. As a consequence, they become self-directed or independent learners. And assessment of learning. Assessment of learning is usually given at the end of a unit, grading period, or a term like a semester. It is meant to assess learning for grading purposes, thus the term assessment of learning. Teachers use evidence of student learning to assess student achievement against learning goals and standards. Three forms of assessment: assessment for learning, assessment as learning, assessment of learning were explained already. Here are the questions. Teachers adjust their plans and engage in corrective teaching. Into what form of assessment are the teachers? Self-assessment and peer assessment are examples under what form of assessment? Teacher A gave a true-false pretest on social justice. Based on the pretest results, he taught his class social justice by correcting whatever wrong concepts the students have and affirmed and expounded on their concepts. After correcting their wrong concepts and affirming their correct answers, Teacher A gave the class a post-test. Among the forms of assessment, explain which one did Teacher A do. The class was taught how to conduct an action research and was required an end of the term written research report. The class was taught how to do the research report and was shown an analytic scoring rubric for them to know how they will be graded. The class took the scoring rubric as guide in the making of the research report. They were all motivated to pass an excellent research report, and as a group, they checked now and then if they were true to the qualities of an excellent report, as seen in the scoring rubric. What form of assessment is described? Teacher B sees to it that she checks for understanding as she teaches to ensure that every student can follow the lesson. With what form of assessment is Teacher B occupied with? Teacher C is done with Unit 1. She wants to know how well her students could demonstrate the knowledge and skills targeted at the beginning of the unit. Into what form of assessment is Teacher C? What form of assessment leads students to become self-directed and independent learners? Complete this analogy. Formative assessment is to assessment for learning. Summative assessment is to long. What form of assessment is used to determine the grades of students? Quarterly examinations, portfolios, exhibitions, performances, presentations, and simulations are examples under what form of assessment?